Hello everyone, this is Big Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you and a welcome return to our classic anime review series. And in this edition we will focus on a space adventure anime, Cowboy Bebop. Now the anime series was created with director Shinichiro Watanabe as part of the Sunrise animation production team. It was originally released from April the 3rd, 1998 to June the 18th, 1998. And then later released internationally on October the 24th, 1988 to April the 24th, 1999. The series has over time garnered huge popularity and has been regarded by many fans as one of the best anime series ever. Now the setup within Cowboy Bebop is that we are put in a future year of 2071 where we join a pair of bounty hunters, Spike and Jet Black, who, with the ship known as Bebop, look to apprehend certain criminals for the ISSP, that's Intersolar System Police, in exchange for money. Now over the course of the series we see further additions to the team in the form of con artist Faye Valentine, very much of a gun-toting space gambler, and also a system hacker named Ed. Over the course of the series, the group have various escapades and misadventures as they constantly chase bounties over the galaxy in order just to survive. Now, overall, Cowboy Bebop is a mix of action, comedy, and science fiction and intrigue. It's for the most part a standalone episodic narrative with some minor arcs involving some characters' backstories. The series for the most part is a brisk, entertaining comic caper with smaller stories that are easy to get into. The stories themselves are very simplified. The show's highlights firstly are its animation, which is super smooth and well produced, and despite being from the late 90s, the show's animation standard still holds up today against many modern anime shows. I love all of the detail of the spaceship designs and the backgrounds, which are kept mostly realistic despite the sci-fi setting. I also like the drawing style of the characters, which is very pleasing on the eye, very distinctive in terms of the aesthetic, but again kept to a more realistic construct in terms to how they are drawn. Now the second best element of the show are the characters, each having their own distinct and engaging personalities. Certainly when we look at the trinity of the characters, if you like, when we look at firstly Spike, he's very young, very self-confident and passive for the most part, but over the course of the series we learn more about his backstory, where we see that he was part of a syndicate of criminal hunters. We see his ongoing battle with the main antagonist Vicious, and we also have a tragic romance where we learn more about his relationship with Julia, particularly towards the end of the series. We also have Jet Black, who for me is probably the best character. He's the most mature, the most level-headed. He's that typically more bigger, bruising character, more physically imposing, and he really is the more authoritative figure of the group. We learn through the show that he himself was part of a former member of the ISSP, and he uses his ex-contacts with the organisations to the team's advantages throughout the show. We of course talk about Faye Valentine, without question one of fans' most favourite characters of the show. She's probably the most iconic character for her obvious sexualised look, very famous of course for having that tight bright yellow shirt and shorts, and also with her red cardigan, and she's very much more of a selfish, very reckless character. We see throughout the beginning of the show she gets into various debts over her gambling habits, and at times she can be very much of a duplicitous character, looking to double cross the team for her own gains. But we also get some interesting elements of her backstory, which involved her being put in cryogenic status, learning that she had very much of a different identity, and to be honest I don't think the show quite utilised enough this very interesting story throughout the series. Now for me the show does have some weaknesses. The main downside for me is that the majority of the stories throughout the show are very disposable and not that very memorable for the most part. So if you are binge watching the show, you may not be as compelled to stay with it, watching it throughout the whole of its entirety. A very good episode is probably followed by 2 or 3 average ones, and then possibly a bad one after that. So the show can suffer very much of an inconsistency in terms of its overall tone. I did mention before that for the most part it's very much of a bright breezy affair, but in actual fact the strongest episodes are much more of a darker, somber take, so this may be a bit jarring and disorientating depending on your viewing preferences. The standalone structure of the show can at times become frustrating and very disappointing if you are somebody who prefers much more of that serialized arc. While we do get some villainous characters throughout the show, I don't believe that they were developed enough and could have had far more impact throughout the entire series, which would have elevated the show much more and made it much more of a compelling story. I also feel that the Ed character was by far the weakest of the whole ensemble. The character itself is very much there for more comedic relief, and there's very little in terms of depth, and the whole origin is a bit of a stretch, to be honest with you, in terms of credibility. Now, as always with anime adaptations, you get multiple dubs, so you have the original Japanese soundtrack and then you have the English soundtrack, which has become very famous for a lot of anime fans, in particularly the intro sequence itself, which is very lively, very catchy. It's got that very much of that James Bond-esque kind of design about it, with various silhouettes of the character. It's very much colourful and vivid and has lots of pop about it, and I think the musical score overall throughout the show is very accomplished and very stylish. So if I had to give an overall score for Cowboy Bebop, I would give it a 6.7 out of 10. Like I said, it's very accomplished in terms of its animation and its soundtrack, and has certainly 3 terrific, very engaging characters, but I just think it suffers from not having a far more substantial story arc, certainly for the most run of the entire 26 episodes, which is hard to get through, especially if you are binge watching. Not that the episodes are very convoluted or complicated, but just because they're very insubstantial, there's not enough there multiple times to keep you coming back to the show. Now, whilst many fans have deemed it one of the best animes of all time, I sadly can't share that sentiment. I think there are far more superior shows that have just as great standard of animation and have far more compelling storylines, and I think Cowboy Bebop could have benefited from those elements, which would have elevated more into a far greater show than what I deemed it to be overall. Now, of course, we do know that there is an upcoming live action adaptation of the show produced by Netflix, which has already caused various controversy because of the looks of certain characters, and of course the recent Instagram video made by the actress who plays Faye Valentine, Danielle Pineda. So those are my thoughts and feelings and review on Cowboy Bebop. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You can also check out other reviews of classic animes, particularly from the 80s and 90s on the channel, and I will also continue to cover far more recent animes as well. If you have any other suggestions of animes that you would like to see me review, then let me know in the comments and I will provide breakdowns of those anime stories as well. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.